It's 4 o'clock. Would you please call the roll?
Yes.
He's here.
Yeah. Mr. Holland, Mr. Martinez, Mr. Rodriguez Pina, Ms. Fano, Mr. Vasquez, Ms. Weinberg, Secretary Pago,
Here.
Treasurer Fernandez Guzman, Vice Chair Gutierrez, Chair Ferre.
Thank you. Would the Vice Chair lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You have the agenda before you. You've had time to read it. And are there any corrections? If not, is there a motion? Second. It's been moved and seconded. Is there further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passed. Mr. Attorney?
Do any of the board members have any conflicts with respect to any matters on the agenda? See one. Okay, so for that, which item is that?
Maria Luisa, can you help me on the exact item? It's the one involving Arazosa.
It's item 9B.
And I will be filling out the Form 8B right now.
Perfect, thank you very much. Thank you.
Are there any other declared conflicts? If not, are there any citizens' comments? Does any member of the public wish to address MDX? If not, that portion is closed. We've approved the minutes. No, ma'am. Where's the agenda?
We approval of the agenda already occurred. Or any changes?
I believe you approved the agenda, but not the minutes.
Okay, so now we're at the minutes. You've had time to look at the minutes. Are there any changes in the minutes? All those, is there a motion? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Opposed? So the minutes, the summary minutes of May 27th are now approved. Okay, Executive Director, it's your report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This past month, a lot of activity, especially around the work program. Staff, Juan Toledo, Helen Cordero, and myself have made presentations and served on panels at various associations and meetings this last month, including the Florida Engineering Society, the Cuban American Association of Civil Engineers, the Engineer Contractors Association of South Florida, and the League of Cities Transportation Committee, who was here for a half a day this past Friday. This past month, we also participated at the Greater Miami Chamber Goals Conference, and along with Secretary Pago, I served on the Critical Issues Transportation Panel, which is a very good conversation of where transportation needs to go and what are the deficiencies and issues, and primarily what's going to be accomplished in the next 12 months. That was a very good conversation. We met with Deputy Mayor Alina Hudak here at MDX for half a day. We focused on asset maintenance. They're interested in looking at how we do asset maintenance and how they can maybe apply some of that at the county. We also discussed various projects that we're working and that have coordination issues with the county, and it was a very good meeting for the county to come here and meet with us. In addition, this last month, Mr. Chair, we met with the Aviation Department and the Director twice to talk about the MIC transfer. And I think we're at a position where the Secretary and I will start meeting with commissioners in the coming month. This last month, it's the start of hurricane season, so every year staff gets together and the consultants help us put together our emergency preparedness plan, which we have and we've discussed with all of the other agencies, so that every issue and every item that MDX is involved with, we've got a plan ready during storm season. This is available to board members if you'd like it. I'll make it available to you. It has a lot of information and how we handle different issues, the different types of issues. This past month, also met with former State Representative Mike Horner, who was hired by Team Florida, and his role is going to be to coordinate legislative agendas of all the transportation agencies, primarily the toll agencies. We had a very candid conversation with him. We had our legislative consultants, Fausto Gomez, participate. It was very productive. He's going to be putting a report together back to Team Florida, which then I will bring back to this board for discussion. I also had a good meeting last week with Senator Rene Garcia. He came to MDX. We had a lengthy conversation. As you know, Senator Garcia was the sponsor of the bill opposing MDX on the Senate side. We had a very good conversation, a conversation that started from not the nicest to one that ended with hugs and exchanging of cell phone numbers and agreeing to have a conversation before taking any direct action in the future. And that was a very good, productive meeting. And we agreed to continue having conversations. The last two items I want to discuss, one of them is actually going to be a discussion item later on the agenda, and it has to do with the selection of the general counsel. The ad hoc meeting did meet, but just so that the board knows, we've posted the position and for 11 days, and we've already gotten 40 respondents. Wow. So that's very, very good. And I know that the discussion later on the agenda is going to be very healthy for that progress. And then finally, Mr. Chair, a member of the public last month asked us to evaluate the possibility of posting all of our committee meetings on video, and also asked that we change the format of our board meetings so that it could be watched on a Mac. We evaluated. The format of the board meeting has already been changed. You can go on YouTube, you can view it from any kind of device by the YouTube channel. As far as the cost of putting all of the committees on video, it's going to be in excess of $100,000, and it's something that I would like to have a conversation with the Intergovernmental and Budget and Finance before we take it to the next level, because I think there is a compromise that we can reach, primarily on the audio side. We do audio record all of our committee meetings. Many of our committee meetings become ad hoc type meetings because of schedules, and I think it's more prudent that we post all the audio online. But that's a conversation that we can have at committee. And with that, Mr. Chair, I conclude my report for this month.
Well, let me ask you why you didn't report on the sale of $316 million.
Sir, because I'm going to leave that to the treasurer and to the CFO, and there's a full presentation on that.
I think
so I didn't want to be repetitive.
I think it's a major accomplishment on your part, and I just wanted to put that on the record, that's all. All right, we're now at the General Counsel's report.
No detailed report. I'll help you through the election process. Other than that, we'll wait until the substantive matters come up.
Yeah. The MPO finally met. The meeting was very short. It went very quickly because, as usual, there was the problem of a quorum. And two of the people that made up the quorum wanted to leave immediately. So the important matters that were before us were accelerated. There was no discussion, and the 5-year plan and the long-range plan were both adopted without any discussion. And I would venture to say, and I don't mean this in an overly negative way, I doubt if too many of the people that voted on this thing read it. So we're talking about $8.5 billion. That's all. It's not really that big. It's an $8.5 billion budget over the next 5 years, and it was approved unbelievably quick. But that's the way this MPO operates. Other than that, I don't think there was anything of any consequence. The only other issue was the Kendall Avenue issue, the Chrome Avenue issue, with 12 people having died in the last 6 months, and of course the accelerated requirement. So they went back and read the record showing that 15 years ago, there were that many people that were dying, and the tragedy that was brought up 10 years ago, and then 5 years ago, and 3 years ago. And so, Gus, you were not there, but you're very able assistant. Answered, I would say satisfactorily, most of the questions, saying that there were a lot of permits that were needed, there were a lot of requirements, right-of-ways, that people had rights, you couldn't just trample over them, and that it's been a long, long, difficult process, but promised to accelerate it and give it priority funding. So hopefully that will get to the Secretary and through the proper course to you. I don't think there was anything else of consequence. You were there?
No, sir. Every year, that was the
Okay.
MPO meeting.
Treasurer's report. Mr. Treasurer?
Hello. Today we're going to have an abbreviated treasurer's report because of two factors. One is going to be the presentation by the Washington Economics Group on the economic impact of MDX on this community, which I think is one that deserves a great deal of attention, not only by this board, but by the community that we serve and the constituents that we represent. And also, we asked Marie to put together a presentation on the Series 2014A revenue bond that we recently issued, which was very, very successful. So, Marie, I'm going to turn it over to you. And by the way, kudos. Once again, great job.
That's what happens when...
Here, Marie.
I'm just going to... $1 million for the 11-month period. This is through May. We anticipate that over year end we'll be at 127, which is right where we presented when we presented the budget, where we thought our targets would be. On the expense side, we show a little bit of a savings, and really the savings is really sort of artificial due to the operational side. We had some transition this year, and that's where you're seeing the savings on the operational expense side. But all in all, our coverage ratios should really come in about a 153 to 155, and that's what we projected in our bond documents as well as in our public workshop at the time that we presented in April. With that, if there's no questions, I'm going to turn it over to Tony Villamil, who's going to do a presentation on his analysis of our...
Are there any questions on the presentation made by Marie? No. Okay. Go ahead. Proceed, Marie.
Board members, Tony Villamil is going to make a presentation. You have the full report in your packet. He summarized it in a PowerPoint that he's going to present now.
Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be with the board and of directors, as well as the executive director and all of you in the audience today, to present the 5-year work program economic impact, and also to discuss a little bit the framework in which this economic impact was produced. We worked closely with a sub-consultant, Sucidi Smith, relative to the bond issue, and had a chapter there on the economic environment of Dade County and long-run projections that I thought were important for us to incorporate also in the economic impact of the 5-year work program, because sometimes we look at data only and we don't realize what's going on in terms of long-term trends, which are very critical. And the MDX 5-year work program, the Transportation Improvement Program, is a critical component of our economy and of our future growth. So let me first talk about the need for mobility and how MDX, as the mobility agency, is helping develop Miami-Dade County for the benefit of residents. If you look at the MPO projections and other projections by the Bureau of Business and Economic Research at University of Florida or the University of Central Florida, as well as the State Economic and Demographic Research Group, they all show significant increases, not only in the state level, but also in Miami-Dade County. In terms of the growth of mobility of the population is quite significant, necessitating mobility solutions. We're growing from 2.5 million residents in 2010 to 3.3 million in 2035. That's a 32% increase in population, which necessitates mobility throughout our county. At the same time, total employment is forecast to increase steadily from 1.2 million in 2010 to close to over 2 million in 2035. This is the employment base, and that's a 60% increase. If you look at where the population is going, where the employment is going, it's right into where the work program is all about, the 5-year work program and future work programs in terms of prioritizing the capital projects. The population is going west, the population is going south. The employment nodes are also around the airport and south. So to that extent, the MDX mobility program is critical to employment, is critical to the movement of people as it is projected in the future. At the same time, another factoid or numbers, economists like numbers, so we like to throw those around, but they're very important in terms of vehicles registered in the county. These are vehicles that are registered in the county. According to the MPO, we're estimated at 1.4 million in 2010, and by 2035, there will be 2.3 million vehicles registered in Miami-Dade County. That's a 50% increase. So you can see the need for mobility and the need for smart investment in our infrastructure. The other.
Excuse me, would you, whoever just came in, would you put your telephone on mute, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
The other point I wanted to highlight, and it's in the report that we prepared for MDX, is the schematic view or a framework view, if you look at it from a clockwise perspective, of the key factors that the work program impacts. Many of them are quantifiable. A lot of them are what we call externality effects that benefit the whole society. I mean, not be quantifiable, but impacts positively all of us relative to economic development, quality of life, and other factors that are important to us. First, if you look on the top on a clockwise basis, one is a leading contributor to economic development in the county in terms of being our infrastructure and mobility agency, moving people and goods and services to the marketplace. To the right is what we did, which is the standard economic impact. The 5-year work program, the investments in the 5-year work program, we're attracting capital from all over the world in terms of our bond issues and putting them to work in highly productive and prioritized capital projects, significantly contributes to jobs, GDP, state and local taxes, and overall economic activity. And we will quantify those for you in a minute, and it's in your report in much greater detail. And then on the bottom is time savings, reduced delays, and fuel costs that infringe on county residents' standard of living. And the consultant C.D. Smith, working with us, have estimated quite a number of time savings in terms of, because of the MDX 5-year work program, and we quantify those in terms of improvements in the economy, productivity, and ability to get from place A to place B faster, and that generates economic activity. And finally, the supplier of efficient travel connecting the top assets of the county. We live in a trade and logistics county where connectivity with the airport, connectivity with the port, connectivity with all the centers of employment are critical in the 21st century, especially in terms of our standard of living, because that's how we make a living, by moving people and goods across national boundaries and across global boundaries. So that's overall kind of the framework. Now, if we go further to the actual numbers, I just summarize them for you today. MDX, the work program itself, is a significant contributor to the standard of living of Miami-Dade County, and I'll mention reasons why. The 5-year work program invests approximately $856 million in a prioritized ranking of capital improvement projects. Prioritized capital improvement projects. These capital improvement projects tend to be what we call in economics lumpy. In other words, they have significant linkages with the rest of the economy relative to jobs, economic activity, and high wages. Over the 5 years, the capital project investments generated in Miami-Dade County supports 10,426 new jobs. in a variety of occupations. You're talking from skilled trades to laborers, you're talking from architects, engineers, suppliers of materials, other things that are important to us in our economy. So they're mostly higher than county wage type occupations. $551 million in additional household income for Miami residents. As residents are employed and as they receive the benefits of small businesses receive the benefit that and pay their payroll to employees and so forth because of the improvement program that generates household income, which is then saved and spent in goods and services within the county. The total economic impact we estimated to be $1.5 billion in terms of making an important contribution to the Miami-Dade County economy. So the 5-year program to me is a win-win. It improves our mobility and also generates significant amount of economic activity and household income for our county. But we didn't stop there. We also took a look at the with the information provided to us by the engineers and traffic consultants of C.D. Smith, took a look and say, okay, now if we do the 5-year program and we invest in these prioritized capital projects, what's the result in terms of mobility? How many hours are we going to save from idling on the expressway systems in the arterial roads? But if we use the expressway system, are we going to save time? And what is the value of time in a modern economy relative to additional income and additional productivity in the county that accrues to the county? So the consultants estimated that we would save probably around $3.2 million annually in terms of time savings by the improvements and the fact that we have greater mobility in the county. $3.2 million in terms of hours of time saved because of the program. In spite of the growth that has taken place during these 5 years in the population. And as you put that through the economic impact model of Miami-Dade, that shows that the increased productivity, the ability to save in fuel, the ability to move quickly from place A to place B relative to what it used to be, that it creates $56 million per year in household income to MDX users as they are able to reduce the time spent in traveling to their destinations. And additionally, the extra activity of that household income supports, over time, 5,900 jobs in the county, which is, again, a positive. So let me just conclude quickly, and again, you have your report, which is in much more detail. The 5-year program is an essential factor for improving mobility and employment opportunities for Miami-Dade County residents. Miami-Dade is increasingly population dense. An urban economy requires smart transportation investments to attract, retain, and expand highway jobs. So when the Beacon Council and Enterprise Florida go out recruiting highway jobs and businesses into our area, the fact that we have a modern transportation system, a modern airport, a modern logistics mobility system like MDX, a modern port are all critical in attracting these high-wage jobs. So therefore, there's a lot of spillover effects from the 5-year work program in that sense. It is also technologically smart, which is what we need in terms of using technology to move faster to the final marketplace. And it's very necessary to connect people and industries with local external markets, both external markets, meaning the markets outside of Dade County in terms of connectivity, but the markets also in the global economy via the port and the airport. So overall, I think it's an extremely well thought out, well-reasoned 5-year work program, capital projects program, and these are the estimated economic impacts using the professional accepted models of Miami-Dade County.
Mr. Chairman, may I? Tony,
Excuse me, are you concluded, Tony?
Yes, thank you, Mr.
So in
Tony
other
has-
words, now we want questions first and then comments later. So questions.
No questions.
Any questions? Any questions? Comments?
Tony, as usual, very impressive report on the part of your firm and a very well thought out report on the part of your firm. We often speak to the education of our user, and we often speak to the better education of our community as to the impact of MDX. And I'm not sure how this is used or has been used in the past to achieve further education of what MDX impact to the community is, but I would certainly encourage the board to do several things with this study, if permissible, under the contract with Washington Economics Group. Number one, that it be submitted to all elected officials at a county and state level as a matter of information on the impact of our agency on this community from an economic perspective. Number two, that we consider using advertisement to communicate to our users in media what the highlights of the work plan are from our perspective and the perspective of Washington Economics on the impact of the economies of this community and how it helps them in ways that are just more than asphalt. I think this is a wonderful opportunity to take a facts-based study and put it in front of the people who often wonder what we are all about. This is what MDX is all about. So I would strongly urge this group and the executive director to use this as an informational and educational tool about MDX beyond asphalt and tolling.
Further comments?
Chairman, if I may.
Mr. Rodriguez Pina first, and then Luz Weinberg second.
Just to emphasize, I think the great point that Mr. Fernandez-Guzman made, I think that this should something that definitely needs to be get out there. And Tony, thank you again for your wonderful job, as expected, by the way. Thank you. I really do believe that this should be communicated. Our ability to get before chambers of commerce, I think these are perfect forums. Mr. Guzman, I think your point, you had similar ideas, but you were much more eloquent than I could be. But I think if we have the opportunity for our communications director, our executive director, to find opportunities with chambers of commerce, that this can be communicated there. So that's the only addendum that I would add, where I think it would talk to the people, the business community that can appreciate these facts. Thank you, sir.
You, Ms. Weinberg.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Carlos. Great points. Would it be possible to, at the very minimum, in a very quick thing we could do is have that uploaded into our website? And then, of course, any documentation that gets produced, I'm not entirely for blasting that out to all the elected officials, state and local, just because, I mean, we often get bombarded with reports and stuff that we generate at once. She sort of has, we did for the bill earlier this year, with the bullet points, the highlights. Something very short, and I'm sure Mario and Javier can come up with something. It's definitely worth getting out. At the very minimum, I would love to see this go up on our website as a link to click here to view the benefits of MDX. That's a very quick fix to get started.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Gutierrez.
Thank you. I think there is an opportunity to present to the elected officials now that you're meeting regarding the MIC. It's a different conversation, but I think it's important to show how MDX is doing and where its program monies are going and how it's impacting Miami-Dade. There's a great parallel that can be accomplished, because if they're going to sign off on something, let them realize that MDX is very stable and it's being very prudent with its funding. Okay, so I think the conversation begins with how we are, and then let's go.
Any other comments? Any other comments? Well, I have two comments. One, we've been around for 16 years. For the first 10, 12 years, we were doing things that needed to be done, which is a refinancing and doing some relatively small things and planning for the big things that later on were done. In the meantime, the state, who had a lot of money then, more than they do now, were spending money. So look at where the money has been spent in the last 20 years by Miami, by the state of Florida, when you were with the state, and Johnny, who's back there, was with the state, and Gus, when you were with the state. And these were not your decisions, and they weren't even Pepe Abru's decisions. They were really made in Tallahassee, and the way things get done in the Department of Transportation FDOT, and I got to tell you, I've been on the FTC now for 3 years, and I can't tell you how it works, because I think it's very difficult to understand how the FTC works. It's a very complex way of doing business. Now, if you look at where the money's been spent, it's been north-south. This is not a criticism, this is just an observation. Now, why did that happen? Well, because the state, and I think rightfully so, said, well, we gave these east-west roads to Miami-Dade County, and Miami-Dade County formed the Miami Expressway Authority under state authority. We're an agency of the state, and that's your responsibility. Well, we didn't have the money to do the things that we're now beginning to do. But we're not playing catch-up because there's been 20 years of money, and if you look at the road system that goes north-south, I-95, the Turnpike, the Heft, Palmetto Expressway, there's a lot of money that's been poured into that, and they're really becoming very, very efficient systems. Now, I understand a lot of people that live in Broward County and work here and vice versa, but I guarantee you, and I don't know if the numbers are available, but of the 1,200,000 people that work here, I guarantee you 250 to 300,000 is the maximum that live outside of Dade County that work here. But so where do the other 950,000 people who work in Miami-Dade County live? And how do they travel? Well, you know where they travel? East-west. See? And so the problem that Miami as a community has is an east-west problem. Okay, so that brings me up to this point. You've heard me, and not me, Maritza and Javier and Bob Holland, and those that have been here. We've been here for 9 years, and our consultants and Luisa Jamil, and everybody is saying that this is the backbone. 836, and now we modified it to 836-112 because there are parallel roads that are necessary to each other. That's the backbone of Miami-Dade County. But you know what? The state doesn't act that way because that's our responsibility, and we have to fund it, and they're not funding us. We don't get any state monies. We don't get any federal monies. So we have to do this with tolls. Well, we had 2 hearings, March and June, and it was a squeaker. In both, by 1 vote, we passed, and guess what? That $560 million, when it's in pocket, which becomes $835 here over the next 10 years or 5 years, that's about 1/10 of what we need. So it only helps us do this 836 for the most part. It does other things, but it's mostly 836 money. And it's Javier Suarez, and I don't agree with it, but he says that all we're doing is fixing the intersections. We're not really impacting with new, and technically he's right. In other words, we're not adding new capacity, we're decongesting because we're helping the way people flow in and out of our system, so that helps. And your estimates, I think, were 30%. Well, that's fine. That's a major contribution. 30% is big time. That's a big contribution. But the point is that we need to finish the Gratigny Expressway. We need to connect better in the southern portion, which is where the growth, as you just stated. We need to connect our assets, and this is a very, very complicated thing. So I really think that in the future, I would recommend that this board consider, since Dr. Villamil, you've done such a wonderful job, that this contract sometime in the future be extended to further prove to those that are remaining skeptics that the problem really is an east-west problem. And this is not, there are some people in the county commission that get very upset when people like me make that statement because they say, well, you've been promising for 30 years to solve the problem of the northwest part of Miami-Dade County, and you haven't done it, and now you want to go fix the west part. But the problem is that that's where the people who work live. So we really need to convince the state especially the state, that they really have to put some more money into Miami-Dade County. Now, you say, well, how are you going to do that? Well, the fact is that in the next 5 years, Gus and his successor in the next 5 years will have $4.3 billion to work with, of which 1.6 is for roads. Hello? 1.6 in 5 years? That's four projects. That's Chrome and 3 other minor projects, or medium projects. But there are no big projects. Now, when I talked to the governor about that, he said, well, you know, you got the Port of Miami, you got the tunnel, you know, you've been swallowing up a lot of our money. And we got to be fair about this thing because we need to help other parts of the state of Florida. Hello, if you look at what's going on in I-4 in Orlando, that's like 5 times bigger than any money that we have, that we're going to get. So we really need to document better the fact that the real movements that need help, because this is all part of Florida, is really an east-west movement. Now, that's not to say, and I'm not talking against Connect 4. Connect 4 pays for itself. With all due respects, I think we should have been doing Connect 4 2-3 years ago, and I think me as chair for the last 2 years and all of us have really did not keep our eye on that ball, and we should have kept it, and we should have pushed it a little bit stronger. And I hope that we do in the future, because I think that's a self-paying project. That doesn't need any state money. That doesn't need any federal money. But there are projects east-west that do need help, and I think we need to do that. Now, the second thing that I wanted to say is this. Yeah, printing it is great, and putting it on the website, that's great. But, you know, politicians, and Maritza, you and Shelley and Rick and Al and all of you who have dealt with government know that politicians pay attention to other politicians and to power and to people. Here's what I think we ought to do. And I've already asked Bob Graham if he would do it. Get Jeb Bush and Bob Graham, and I guarantee you if Bob Graham does it, Jeb Bush will. And I get the mayor of Miami-Dade County, and I get the mayor of the top 3 cities, Tomas Regalado, what's the fellow in Levine in Miami Beach, and Hernandez in Hialeah, and get the 3 of them to, at a chamber meeting, ask for an hour to make a presentation on this report and MDX, so that Javier and those of us that want to participate will make our points, and hopefully by then we'll have more information as to the importance of East-West and how we can do this. Now, the reason why it's important is because this board has in the past taken very strong positions, and I agree with that position and going forward, that we cannot subsidize transit. We can't do it. We just don't have that kind of money. I'd like to do it. I know Javier Suarez, every time he sees me, he goes on a rant about how, well, you know what? You know what Javier Suarez and others have done here? They've taken a 45% fare box payment to our buses and to our metro rail, and they've shrunk it to 25%. So today, out of every dollar that we spend for buses, 75 cents is subsidized by you and me. Hello. By you and me. Not 45. It isn't 45. It's now down to 25%. And so the point of all this is that with the hunger, if we follow the example of New York, here's what's happened in New York. They said, okay, let's do that. Let's take the tolls. Well, you know what? You know how much it costs for you to get in from New Jersey or Connecticut into New York? It's costing about $10 or $12 in and out for a person who lives in Connecticut and works in New York just to get in. But guess where that money's going? It's going to subsidize the transit system. So, and there's no end to it. So all the experts that have looked at what happens to toll monies that go into transit systems conclude that it really doesn't work because there's no end to it. It's never enough. And so the issue then is, well, what can MDX do to help other agencies and the private sector, and that is to use our assets to mass move people? Well, that's a very complicated thing because that requires parking, it requires, what's the name of this new taxi service? Uber, and the other one that's competing with the Lyft. It requires new technology on what parking is available, and if it costs me $20 or $30 or $40. I mean, I went to dinner last night in downtown Miami to celebrate my 79th birthday, and guess what? It cost me $30 just to park. Thank God I wasn't paying the bill at the restaurant, but I mean, to park $30 for an hour and a half, I mean, it's something else. So, I mean, we're not far from New York. So all these things, I think, come into play, and I think the way to get people's attention is not through issues, because unfortunately we politicians don't pay attention to issues with some exceptions. We pay attention to power and people. But I guarantee you, Jeb Bush and Bob Graham and the mayor and the three top mayors are the invitees, and they invite their list, that we'll have a nice turnout, and I think you'll see some further impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly welcome that in addition to the other. I believe, Marie, we have one more thing that we'd like to cover today, if at all possible. Tony, thank you again. He's my favorite economist. He actually speaks a language I understand. This is with respect to the 2014A series revenue bonds, which was a very successful offering.
We went through the rating process. We had all our ratings affirmed by all three entities. I wanted to point out a few of the things that are the strengths of this authority. The adoption of the toll policy, which is a board-controlled item, is one of the top strengths that they mentioned. It's very important that they have confidence that the board recognizes that the financial stability of this organization is upon them, and it was recognized, and it's one of the top strengths. The high level of demand is noted. The economist part of the presentation fits in as one of the key components of the strengths. The well-diversified economic base that's here, you have a number of important
Excuse the interruption, Randy, but you didn't have this report when you went before.
No, we did have this report. We used this report in conjunction with our rating presentation.
If I may, board members, every time we issue bonds, we have an economic analysis that's presented. What we did was we asked Tony Villamil to take that type of analysis, look at the work program, and put it in a more broad perspective for the local economy. That's what
in our
Tony
report,
did.
we did have Tony Villamil's input.
Yes, he actually was one of the presenters in the rating presentations. We brought him in because we know the strength of the local economic is one of the key things that we're looking for. So it was an important part of our presentation to include him. The very strong liquidity levels that you have for this level of ratings. And finally, the way the capital plan was structured, there's no additional debt requirements, which was considered a strength. The challenges are what to be expected. The large ongoing capital program, it's large for the size of entity. There's always going to be a risk involved with a large capital program, but they've also noted that one of the strengths is the way you manage your capital programs. Some of your risks to the variable rate and swaps, and finally the ORT conversion concerns as it comes to collections and maybe some of the diversion of traffics. But overall, I think the rating agencies had a very easy time affirming your credit. They all talked about what we were going through during those couple months at the state level. I think that left just enough doubt in their minds that they precluded us from getting the potential upgrades. What I wanted to do is show you where we were when we started this capital program and where we ended up, just to get a general concept. I included two levels. The AAA GO is what you price off of. There's a spread. We also showed an AGO. That is still a better credit rating than what we get as an A- revenue credit. But I just wanted to give you a general historic spread.
Repeat that again. You're saying that the A minus is better than the A?
No, the A- is worse than the AGO. The AGO, the top line, is still a little bit lower than where we were at that point in time. But general indices, they don't get that specific for us. As you can see, back in the process when we started this program, interest rates were climbing very quickly. There were a few volatile actions. So we had to go into this program with a little bit of concern and being a little bit conservative. Interest rates, while they only went up 120 basis points only, as a percentage, it was a 30% increase, and it was historic in nature on how fast they're rising. So we had a lot of concerns, but we built the program so that you could do it at those levels. When we originally started this program, we were holding a consistent 1.6 coverage. But as you can see, as the year went on, we got a little forgiveness. In January is when we asked to start moving fast. Our first holdup was because of the complexity of the traffic study. It was very detailed. You're changing a lot of items. It took a little bit longer than what we had hoped. We couldn't snap it around quite as fast. And then we had the state. I'd like to say we planned it, but we didn't, but interest rates continued to migrate down. The other thing that worked in our favor substantially is the volume of municipal debt got less and less. During this time, the less volume means more demand. And what that did is, as the rates stayed low, the demand for yield, i.e. A- credit, good A- credit, was even more demand. So you were able to get a better pricing spread to that bottom line than what we were at last year. I want to talk about the capital plan. The total cost that we were working with was $917 million. FDOT contributes $136 million towards this plan. If we didn't have it, we would have had to issue more debt because we essentially sized.
Is that 826, 836?
That's 836, 935, and Central Boulevard, a little component of each. It's scheduled to come in over the 5-year, 6-year capital plan, and we're able to put it in with our pay-as-you-go. That left a funding requirement of $781 million. We still had $30 million from the 2010. That was our original ORT, and that was part of the reason why our debt service climbs the way it does, because we were building in the ORT program back in 2010. We always knew we were going to get additional revenues from the ORT because of closing the system, and it was allowed. This capital program is level debt service, so there's not a lot of growing debt service. It's just layered on right on top of the existing. Our current program, we sized it to $305 million, and that's because we knew how much, with our revenue projections, how much cash would drop to the bottom bucket, and we could pay for it with your system revenues. Your system revenues is the lowest cost money you can find. It's 0%. There's nothing bad about it. It is, wish we could do more, but as it was, we were able to come in with $305 million. That is roughly, from bond proceeds, on this bond proceeds, is 44% of the system came from your funding. Came from bond funding. A little recap on the bond issue. These are really extraordinary numbers. The par amount was $314 million. The reason over $305 million is you still had capitalized interest for 1 year. It's just to make sure that the revenues come in from the ORT conversion. We have a fully funded debt service reserve fund, which was an additional $22 million. But you received a premium over these issues because a lot of your coupon rates were priced at 5%, and because your yields are much lower, you received a premium on that sale. Your maturity amortizations are from 2020 to 2044. The reason we didn't amortize any principal during the construction period is because if every dollar of principal I would have put in there would have been $1 less of pay-as-you-go. And we just talked about the lowest possible funding is your own cash. So we didn't amortize any principal during that time period. Your serial maturities for yields, 188, that's essentially 6 years out. That's a 188 at 6 years. And it goes up to 383. $142 million was sold at that low rate. We did have the one 4.3% term bond is a retail type structure couponing. There wasn't that much demand for retail. We just didn't see that much out there. So we didn't have a lot of that. It would have been nicer to be at that level because the 435 isn't the effective yield, it is the real yield. The 404 and the 410 is where the bulk of the debt was sold, just because with level debt service, just like a mortgage, the longer you pay, more of the principal applies towards the payment towards the end of your life of your financing. The average life on this is 20.4 years. The last few new money issues, we were looking at 27 years. So this is a very big step. It's one of the biggest things that make me happy. Your TIC 422, that's what a lot of people look at. What we really look at is the IC. That's what the AICPA looks at for discounting cash flows. That includes all cost. That was a whopping 426. That's one of the lowest rates that I've seen on an A- revenue issuer in quite a while. And for a recap, during the construction period, your total debt service is $15.6 million, and thereafter it's $22.2 million until it matures per year. Where does that leave you when it comes to coverages and debt service? As you can see, the coverage levels in 2014, there's no additional debt. That is where you were right now, a 153. 2015, we have a year's worth of capitalized interest just to make sure that we can, in fact, bring the ORT online on time. If everything comes in, 100% of that excess cash goes to reducing the amount of bonds that we sold. 100% drops right down. As you can see, the coverages during the construction period stay at a healthy 1.8 to 1.9 range. There's no waste. Again, all that drops to do is your pay-as-you-go. This is a little comparison. The gray was your existing debt before we sold any of this new bond issue. The purple is the principal. The yellow is the interest component. If it wasn't sitting on the gray, you would see a very level structure. But unfortunately, it's sitting on the existing debt, and it's roughly level for the majority of the bond structure. But it is gradually growing in the first part, and that was our original ORT assumptions. When we started this, the yellow or gold line that goes straight across the line was the 1.6 where we originally structured back in May, June of last year. We essentially needed to do two different bond issues because we couldn't incorporate all the debt in the first bond issue because we couldn't afford it. We had to come up with a different capital plan. Come July, we looked at it. We still needed two bond issues because interest rates were still a little high, but much more heavily focused on the first bond issue, which had a lower cost of funds. We also got up-to-date revenue numbers, and you can see our coverages, well, that's the light blue line, we were able to get to our 1.6, and we saw some opportunities. The navy blue line is where we ended up. This gives you a lot of flexibility going forward. And again, This revenue stream is based off of non-CPI adjusted amounts. This gives you, the board, flexibility going forward. This is just a little historical chart for you, just to kind of show you where interest rates were when you priced your different bond issues. You can see we're not at the absolute lows, but when you factor in the credit spreads, I think the 2014 compares very, very favorably to the 2013 bond issue. This is just a recap to let you know that over the last 5 years, 2010 was the first one I had the pleasure to work with you guys. That was the ORT structure. That had a refunding that allowed us to create some capacity so we wouldn't have to do any toll rate increases for an extended period of time until everything was in place. The new money was layered in, but it was essentially more back-end loaded. It's the only way we could get it done. We did 2 refundings since then to help alleviate for not having to raise tolls. We had some revenue constraints. They were for savings, but we targeted the savings in important pinch years for ourselves. And then finally, our new money issue this year, which gives us our level debt. I just wanted to kind of, this visualizations is a little bit easier. If you look at this slide, you can see the last new money issue, the kind of the purplish one right in the middle. Notice how much thicker that is for the total amount of debt service. It's the only way we could have done it back then. I wish we didn't have to, but that got us to the point where we are today with ORT fully funded and this bond issue strictly expanding the system, allowing for more capacity. And that's my report. I'm very pleased. I hope you're half as pleased as I am because it turned out wonderful.
Mr. Treasurer?
Before I would yield to Mr. Avia, I would like to say that when you issue debt, it's a time when you're either rewarded for prudent decisions of the past and how those decisions impact your future, or penalized for imprudent decisions of the past and how those impact the future. It's a funny environment. In this particular case, what you witnessed is, yes, there was luck involved because we had a very favorable interest rate environment, which we also worked very hard to time as close as we could to as well. But this is a culmination of a lot of prudent decisions of the past that will be impacting our future. And you're being rewarded as an agency accordingly by the market. I will tell you also that it is my hope and anticipation that in the next cycle of rating, MDX will be at a higher rated level. I think this time we were unnecessarily penalized for some things that perhaps were a bit out of our control, but I do not foresee any issues with MDX rising to the next level in the next go-around. And I've got to compliment Marie and Randy and all of the folks that were involved in this issuance, because I got to tell you, I am more pleased than you are, Randy, because it's tough to sit up here and listen to some of the battle issues, hold your ground for what we knew was necessary to make these things happen. So thank you for a great presentation.
The one thing I want to point out is the amount of effort that was put in for marketing these bonds. You got a number of new major funds buying your bonds. I was very pleased with the number of introductions of the one-on-ones that your senior underwriter introduced. But then your CFO carried the day educating them on your credit, and that's a big component why you are pricing better than an A- credit. You price through that level, and essentially that makes it a little bit easier. It's the same thing that happened to the aviation department. We had a lower rating, and the market told the rating agencies they were wrong, and shortly after we priced, they came back with a better rating. So it's
Wow.
You're starting down the path.
I just have a comment. You presented to all 3 agencies, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, having had done that, it is nothing short of a medical exam. It's very, very difficult. I know I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but so my comments are on page 2, where you identify strengths and challenges. Of the strengths, there are 6 bullet points. We don't control 2 of the 6. But the other 4 we do control. So it is a direct reflection of decisions and efforts that were made by this team, and it's just nothing short of amazing. And when you look at page 6 at the DSCR, I'm blushing. It's so good. It really is fantastic. So, Mr. Treasurer, I have to tell you, the CFO and you, I mean, just a tremendous job. Tremendous job. Thank you. I'm very proud to be part of this board during this particular period. Really am. Thank you. This job. Thank you. I'm very proud to be part of this board during this particular period. Really am. Thank you.
We would like to, if at all possible, acknowledge J.W. Howard from Morgan Stanley, who is here and who is an integral
Howard,
part
would
of
you
this
please
process. He's
step
in the
forward?
back. There he is.
Just step forward so that we can acknowledge you and thank you.
Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It was a pleasure to serve you all. A great pleasure to work with your team. And I want to echo Randy's comments. Your CFO, we had, just so you know, back to back to back, 10 investor calls, 10. And she carried the whole weight of the presentation. And so the themes that were coming from the investors were, okay, explain ORT. Okay, we get it. Now we get it. Explain the legislation. Okay, now we get it. And now we understand that this is an improving credit. And so that's why they jumped on your issue, because they're going to get rewarded when you get upgraded. So congratulations. And thank you again. It was a pleasure serving you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Well, I just like to say that one of the heartening things of this team is that nobody wants to take the credit. And Randy says, no, it's Marie, and Marie says, no, it's Randy, and everybody says that it's we're lucky to have such a great treasurer, and of course, don't forget the executive director, and don't forget the rest of the board that understood very complicated financial things. Norman, it's good to see you here. Thanks for all your help in the past and your guidance. So it really, it's a dream come true. It's a dream that Sonny Holtzman and our former executive director, who's here. This is your work. Coming, it didn't happen then, but you were working in that direction, and it took a little bit longer than it should have, but here we are, and it's an amazing accomplishment. And I think it really gives us a major impetus going forward. And it makes, I think, our job in selling easier, because with all due respect to some of these legislators that are sometimes our antagonists, they don't understand what the hell this is all about. But what they do understand is that everybody else is saying, God, that MDX really delivers. They get the job done. And so it isn't just the mayor saying it, and it isn't just Chairman Rebecca Sosa saying it. It seems to be a repetition at the Chamber of Commerce meetings. It's a recognition of Javier, and he's being invited to more and more things. That's why he's the next president of the IBTTA. So it's his peers recognizing it. It's people from all over the state. I hear it at the Florida Transportation Commission. When they talk about MDX, they talk about MDX with a lot of respect. And I think it's, and Javier said this, and Javier's doing that, and Javier, and well, Javier's doesn't like what Team Florida's doing here, so we need to back him up. And so this is, we're really coming together in a very, very nice way, and it's really been a wonderful effort of the past chairs and the people that have worked so diligently, because you know what? We're a team. Okay, so then now we're into committee reports, which we're going to skip because they're really in the regular agenda. We now have the consent agenda, which is travel approval.
Mr. Chair, in addition to the consent agenda, one item that I wanted to make everyone aware of, there is an IBTTA meeting in July, and it's for all electronic tolling. I have staff attending. I'm not going to be able to attend because I'm going to be out of town. It's in San Diego, But if anyone's interested or wants to get more information, Maria Luisa has that information.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we're about to elect a new chair and a board, and I would recommend that whoever the new chair is, that he or she encourage some of the newer members to go to these, because I'm going to tell you, Norman and I wouldn't miss one of these things in the past, and I got an education that has served me well. So it's a real education. So whoever the next chair is, I think ought to really use a little heavier hand than she usually does to force these issues. Now, we're at the consent agenda, which is item 8A. Is there a motion? It's been moved and seconded. Further discussion on 8A. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Aye. Passes. We're now on the regular agenda. Mr. Director XA, Mr. Attorney, would you read the resolution?
Approval of Resolution 1402, authorizing the transfer of funds to Miami Intermodal Center to be endorsed by it was endorsed by the Budget and Finance Committee. And also, Mr. Chair, I would like to remove the third whereas clause, which contemplated that the MIC property had already been transferred, and so that's been delayed a little bit, so we need to take out that whereas clause. So if the motion could include...
As amended.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so now under discussion, Mr. Executive Director?
No additional discussion on this.
Is there a second to the motion? The motion's been moved and seconded. Further discussion on this item? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It passes unanimously. We're on item 9B.
MDX procurement contract number RFP 0901, transportation asset maintenance, $4,656,091.90, including mixed services of $250,000, endorsed by the Operation Committee on June 17, 2014. This is approval of a contract assignment and extension for a term not to exceed 9 months through March 31st, 2015, and a contract amount increase of $4.656 million.
Let the record reflect that Mr. Member Vasquez has recused himself properly, and the matter is now before us.
Board members, before you discuss and vote on this item, at the Operations Committee, this was thoroughly discussed. A lot of questions were asked. One of the questions that was asked was, have all of the parties agreed to this? And I am very happy to say that all of the parties have signed except for MDX, pending on the board's approval. So whatever this board action is, the agreement, the terms that we settled with the vendors will not change. And we assured that before bringing it to the board.
Motion?
Is there a second? Is there further discussion on item 9B? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
So it passes unanimously. Now, I would like to, out of personal privilege, ask that the election of authority officers be put at the end of the meeting so that we can get into the general counsel recruitment issue. And I have some words that I want to say before I give up the chair. So if it meets with your approval, does anybody have any objections to my doing that? All right. So now we're at the general counsel recruit issue.
Mr. Chairman, I think the chairman of the ad hoc committee, Luis Martinez, is on the phone. And
good evening, everybody.
Chairman Martinez, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me thank everyone for their patience. If you can't hear me, please let me know. The committee has met on 2 occasions. It's been an extremely productive committee. I'd like to thank all the members who have really participated, Shelley, Alfredo, Mr. Vasquez. We recommend at this time we've put together 2 issues. One, we've made a recommendation of what we believe should be posted. One of the things we did that initially we made changes to was the original posting had very hard line requirements for someone to qualify to even apply for our position. Many of those positions are very unique, and it would reduce the pool dramatically. What we've done is we've opened it up a little bit with those same requirements being recommended, so that if we find someone that is young, that has some of the qualifications that we need, but not all of them, at least we can give that person the opportunity to meet with our staff and then ultimately with us, to give us the opportunity to bring in somebody that we feel could be somebody new and exciting. Basically, as one of my dear friends has said, thinking out of the box. We also, Mr. Vasquez, you'd like to explain a little bit about what you were concerned about. He was concerned, and this was brought forth during our last meeting, that there might be an issue about the way our setup is on who is the general counsel responsible to, and whether or not that affects people's inclination and desire to even apply for our position, because it seems to be a little bit confusion, and whether or not they are really, under the current system, required to be masters to have two masters, for lack of a better word. Javier, Javier Vasquez, is that an accurate description of what we talked about the last meeting?
Sure, and if I could,
Go into a little more detail.
Sure.
Go ahead, Mr. Vasquez.
Thank you, and forgive me, I'm struggling with a little bit of hoarseness here. I didn't realize what happened when USA scored their second goal on Sunday.
That happened to all of us, by the way.
But anyways, thank you, Louis. The issue that I'd like to raise for discussion that I think is worthwhile taking just a brief look at is, if we look at, Louis, could you put the phone on mute while?
Yeah.
Thank you. Flow chart.
I apologize to everyone.
No problem. If you look at our flow chart and you see we have the board of directors up at the top. Underneath that, you go directly to our executive director, and underneath the executive director, we have a breakout of all the departments that report to our executive director. Our legal counsel position is off to the side, and I wish we had the floor chart to show it, but it's okay. We can visualize it with this discussion. Is off to a side and inserted between the board and the executive director position. My concern that I'm raising, not because I'm against where it's at, but because I think it's worth talking about, is whether the positioning of that general counsel position between the board and the executive director position perhaps precludes some qualified candidates from applying, because of the fact that that person that would be an in-house legal counsel working daily with our executive director is also the person that's going to be serving as the ethics officer to the board. And that person may find themselves in a difficult position sometimes. My understanding is that prior legal counsel has handled that issue very well here, but I'm not sure that that's the case, or those confidence levels are things that everybody has, or others and candidates may.
So your recommendation is what?
My recommendation is that we look, before we make a final decision on this issue, is that we look at the possibility, keeping costs in mind, as to whether having and repositioning that legal counsel position underneath the executive director might not behoove this board, with the board having perhaps separate outside legal counsel for opportunities when it may need opinions or ethics guidance. And again, for discussion purposes.
Okay, so Maritza first, and you're
You
second.
can speak. I think.
If I may, Chairman, also.
Okay.
And Louis third.
Because I come from a regulated industry that deals with this issue of conflict between a general counsel and a CEO on a pretty frequent basis, there are acceptable ways to handle that without having to incur or create a secondary counsel position. The secondary counsel position can be created for special tasks and issues that the board may wish to pursue that sort of advice on. But typically what happens is a dotted line versus a solid line reporting relationship between the CEO and the board. It is not unusual to have a dotted line from a corporate general counsel to the CEO, meaning that that general counsel is at the service of the CEO for issues related to the agency, with a direct line to the board, if the board wishes to have it that way, or the inverse, which is a dotted line to the board for governance issues and reporting line to the CEO. Not unusual at all. Mr. Weiss can chime in if he'd like. Very acceptable in most industries that I've been associated with, regulated or not. And counsel is able to keep
Solve it at that point.
That is correct.
Right, got it. All right, you're next.
Yeah. It is so important for in-house counsel to also respond to the needs of the board.
Absolutely.
So vital for that individual to fully understand that he or she has two very distinct bosses, the policymakers and the executive director. That does not mean that we alone would be firing that individual. It would be a dual decision based on the recommendation of the individual that actually works with he or she every day. You know, a mere moving in, because it's out on the left, may be in, but still in the middle, because it needs to maintain itself in the middle. It worked in the past, and I think it represents us in a way that it's amazing. You need to have that wall. What the board is doing and also what MDX is doing. It's that delicate balance where it doesn't tip to any one direction, because that individual fully understands that it's got to be for the greater good of MDX and not for the greater good of what's good for MDX may not be good for what the board is doing and the people that it represents. So I like the fact that it's in the middle, and I don't think it's going to cost us anymore. I think the problem that we had in the past is probably has to do with the criterias and the weight in the criterias that we had. We need to take another look at what we had going there.
Luz?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand where Governor Vasquez is coming from. I don't like the reasoning behind that, Javier, and I'll tell you why. I don't know that we want to even consider interviewing or hiring someone whose authority over, in terms of when it comes to our ethics, will even preclude him or her from applying. I don't like that feeling or how that even sounds. We need someone who is very strong, who not only knows the law, but will know exactly where he or she stands on that growth chart in terms of their reporting responsibilities to the board, and also their very real responsibility.
And your recommendation is?
I mean, I come from a city where our attorney and our city manager, et cetera, / executive director, or charter officers. I like the way where it's at now, and I don't know that this is the time to shift that. I am confident that now that we have a greater pool, that we'll have a good candidate. They'll just need to know that they got to report to us and keep us in check and work day in the day with Javier.
Thank you. So next is member Javi, you're next, unless you want to yield to Carlos.
Go ahead, I'll go last.
Just one little comment. The problem is not necessarily the issues that have been discussed. The problem is that any candidate would want to know who has the ability and power to fire me, dismiss me, or take... No, you cannot do that. I'm sorry. There is no way that you can have two bodies rule over one position. You may, however, decide that the executive director has a right to recommend dismissal with the approval of the board, but you cannot have the right to fire by both bodies. Right, but it has to be very well worded, and that person reports on an administrative level to the executive director, because you cannot have dual reporting. It does not work. General counsel would never accept that. It's very tenuous.
You have the word, and then Councilor Weiss wants to say something.
My last comment on this is, as the rookie on the board, I am not here proposing any changes. I am a strong believer in these moments as the moment to have dialogue about the issue, because if there is anything dysfunctional about the setup that we have, now's the time to talk about it.
This is the time to do it, not when it
I'm not
happens.
proposing any changes. I'm glad we're having the conversation.
Mr. Weiss, you want to say something?
But I think I disagree with everybody a little bit. I've operated under the typical system for almost 30 years. And I view that I work for the board. I work for you. and I have a increasingly wonderful relationship with your executive director. But the executive director knows, and I've told him this, and we tell everyone that we represent this, that if I ever feel like the executive director is doing something that I don't think is in the best interest of the authority, or if I have a disagreement with the executive director, or if I say to the executive director, you need to have this provision in this contract, and this has never happened in 30 years, and the executive director or a city manager says, I'm not putting that provision in the contract, then when it comes up to in front of the board, I will raise my hand and I would say, I don't think this is legally sufficient. And so I think that anybody who wants this position is going to want to report to the board. Because of the sort of accommodation that we've done while we've been here, which has worked out very smoothly, but I don't think there should be any reporting relationship other than a collegial one between the executive director and the attorney. And this works in almost every city, almost in Florida, almost every authority, which is I work for the board, but we supply day-to-day advice to the executive director and the executive director's staff. It's somewhat of a checks and balances. I am somewhat of your general counsel is somewhat of an independent voice. And
So, Mr. Weiss, let me ask you then the question, as it is currently written, are you satisfied that that meets the requirements that you're just stating?
the state law says that you have the authority to hire legal counsel. And I was actually looking for the organizational chart. I didn't see it, but I think it should be a direct line. In most jurisdictions like this, there is a direct line from the board to the legal counsel, to your general counsel.
So then let's leave it this way. Would you look at the current wording that we have, and if you, in your opinion, are not satisfied, would you then report back to Mr. Martinez and his committee, and then you will then come back to the board, Mr. Martinez, to the next board, and then hopefully finalize this?
Let me just add one more thing before in terms of hiring and firing, I view that I work for the board. I have the comfort that if the executive director and I have some dispute, and that he does not have the ability to terminate me. Now, this has never happened, and sorry, I'm not being personal about it, but I don't view that he has the ability to. Now, he could go to the board and say, you know what, I don't think the general counsel is doing a very good job. I think they're giving you bad advice. I don't like whatever. In the same way, and this has only happened once in 30 years, where I thought that a city manager was not really doing a very good job, and I went to the board and said, I think they're doing things, and I think you should really take a look at what they're doing. But it's a relationship of equals, that the executive director and the general counsel are on equal levels with the board, and that's the way every city operates.
Now, so before, Carlos, you make a comment, that's the difference between the public sector and the private sector.
With one little problem. The administrative components of the managing of the position, you're not accounting for. So here's what I would like to see. I would like to see your recommendation, but I would also like to see who deals with the mundane actions of administrative management of a general in-house counsel who is part of staff, and that is a reporting dotted line relationship to the executive director with a direct line to the board. I'm sorry, I must disagree.
That's all. It's all fine. I just want to understand exactly what you're talking about, the mundane administrative responsibilities. I didn't really know.
Would you?
I take off whenever I want. I asked Joe Sirota.
I know, but you're independent in-house counsel.
No.
This is an in-house counsel, which is a staff of the agency. So, unfortunately,
I understand.
In that environment, you have to have a.
I think Carlos has a point. So I go back to my question to
I'll
you.
take a look at what you have.
You look and see if you feel that it
committee.
is satisfactory. Then you go back to Mr. Martinez and go to committee, and then come to the board again.
Glad to do that.
Are there any other questions on this? Any other comments? Huh? Mr. Martinez?
I got my marching orders.
Anything else on this issue?
I do
Yeah.
strongly recommend.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, hold on. There's somebody else who was talking. Who was talking before?
It was me, Chairman.
Okay, all right, Luz, go ahead.
No, I just want to back Richard Weiss on this. We're all very comfortable right now because we happen to have a fantastic executive director. And I mentioned earlier in my comments, all I have known is the exact system that Richard just described. Being in the city now 9.5 years of Aventura, it is what municipalities do. We are too a public agency. Difference being perhaps that in Aventura we're not as busy, thankfully, so our in-house, we don't have in-house counsel, et cetera. But there is something not to be dismissed here. We right now thankfully enjoy a very thorough and capable executive director. I do like the ability to have that responsibility, that back and forth of the two, the director, in-house counsel, both reporting to the board, the checks and balances, because who knows, one day that might come in handy. So I will caution the board, while Richard's looking at the language, that might still be the way to go, having a dotted line across between Javier and the new in-house counsel and a direct line report to the board, because somebody has to be checking and balancing when we're not around often.
All right, so after Richard looks at it, he'll report back to Mr. Martinez, and if that's the appropriate place then for that to come forward, and then a future board meeting will deal with that specific issue. And I understand what Carlos is saying, and I really agree with it.
I understand.
But I understand what you're saying, which is basically what Maritza was saying, and I agree with that too. And I don't think it's contradictory. Okay, any further discussion on this item?
No,
all right,
just
then
one
we're...
more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I may, Mr.
Please.
Chair, I just want to make sure, though, that the board has no objection for the new advertisement to go out, because we really need to move forward with trying to bring in a new general counsel.
I think that's already gone out, hasn't it?
Yeah, I just want to make
It has already gone out, so I mean, that's a moot point. It's out.
Very good. Thank you.
Issue. We're now on item 11, which is procurement report.
Nothing to report. It's in your package.
So then we're to my comments. Here's what I basically wanted to do, since I'm coming to the end of my 2 years as chair. First of all, I want to thank absolutely everyone that I have had the honor and the privilege to work with, without any exceptions. I think everybody has served their causes well. The objections and the adversary roles that ensued were healthy. They brought up a lot of good strengths. It strengthened the weak points. I think we're the stronger and the better for it. I think we've made a lot of headway. I think, Richard, thanks to you from the outside for the wonderful work that you've done. Randy, to you and your team, the HNTB, and I don't know, is Rick here? Is Rick here today? But they're represented. And every member of the board, Gus in particular, to you and to District 6 and all your wonderful team. I think we really worked for a common cause. Yes, we have our differences here and there, and we fight them out and argue, but we come to conclusions. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to conclude the strategic plan. I'm sorry that we haven't really concluded the MIC, but I think we're not far from it. I'm glad that we sold the bonds in this spectacular way that we did. And by the way, Randy, I forgot to point out that the last time we went to bat, we were oversubscribed 6 times also. So 6 times then and 6 times now. We saved $30 million then. We saved a lot more than that this time. I think it's fortuitous that I was so insistent that we go in January and February, and I kept fighting with everybody to please forget all this stuff and go. Let's go in March. If we'd gone in March, we would have paid a lot more. We would have gotten, but with all due respect, that's just pure luck. The fact is that we just lucked out, but I mean, we have some guardian angels that are looking out after us. So luck is 99% sweat. So as far as I'm concerned, it really was just a wonderful teamwork. So the first thing that I wanted to say is thanks. The second thing I want to say is that we're in the middle of a strategic plan. We're not quite at the halfway point, but we soon will be. I think we have three absolutely exceptional chairmen, and they're all doing spectacular. I can't tell you how impressed I was with Rick yesterday and the wonderful work that you've done, but also, of course, of Jose and Carlos. We really have a great team, and I think we're headed in the right direction. So all those things that I was talking about earlier, you know, they can be summed up in one word: strategic plan. All those things fit under the issue of the strategic plan. There isn't a major successful company, if it's Apple or Microsoft or Standard Oil, Exxon, or any of the major successful companies that don't have strategic plans. So what's the difference between a strategic plan and, for example, the communist planned economy? Well, there's a big, big, big difference. In a planned economy, you know, there's no flexibility. There's no way of what a strategic plan is our best, most scientific, most well thought out plan to achieve goals. But it has all kinds. It has plan A and plan B and plan C, and what happens if this doesn't happen and what happens if that happens. And it's just a way for us to cut through and imitate in the public sector what the private sector does, and that is to do it quicker, better, cheaper. That's it. What we're doing in the strategic plan is trying to figure out ways to do it quicker, better, cheaper. And that's it. It's really no more than that. And so I know that a lot of people question strategic plans as being theoretical bullshit, but it's not. It really is a working tool. It's an important working tool. And I think with this particular board that we have, I think it's a wonderful wonderful tool to achieve the things that we really need to achieve. I asked Javier, I said, Javier, in my final words as chair, is there anything in particular you want me to stress? And he looked at me and he said, strategic plan. That's it. So, you know, it's like MacArthur. I feel like MacArthur when he was at West Point. And, you know, and when he finally finished his speech, he said, the core, the core, the core. So thank you all for all your wonderful help. And I really have been privileged and honored to be chair for the last 2 years. Thank you. Richard, it's all yours.
I'm not sure who I'm reporting to, but I'm reading this anyway.
Is this a dotted line? Is this a dotted line report or a straight line report?
My wife just texted me. I have a straight line to my wife, so she's one of my bosses. The other ones I'm not sure about. Okay. So first of all, I'm honored to be able to take you through this process. I'd like to give you a little bit more detail than you probably need, but it is so important that I want to make sure that it goes very smoothly. And Maria Luisa, it seems to me that we have 9 present and 2 on the phone. Is that correct? 3 on the phone. Oh, okay. I hadn't heard Robert's voice. So that's 12. 12 people will be voting. And since we have a quorum in the room, the people outside the room, under the Attorney General's opinion, are able to vote. Okay. I'm going to open up the floor for nominations, starting with the office of the chair. You may nominate yourself, or you can nominate someone else. Unlike Robert's Rules, which doesn't require a second for a nomination, we looked at the rules carefully, and your bylaws do require a second for a nomination. Members do not need to be present in the room or even present at the meeting to be nominated. After the nominations are closed, if a nominee chooses, they can make a statement as to supporting their candidacy or not, or if board members have questions of the nominee, they are free to ask questions. Then each candidate can have the opportunity to comment if you feel like that's necessary. After that, the board is free to have a discussion regarding the various candidates if you feel like that's appropriate or necessary. And then when the comments are done, the official balloting will start. Members' votes will be made by written ballots, but in a slight departure from what you've previously done, we do need, in accordance with the Sunshine Law, to read out how each person voted. So you can vote by written ballot, but then I'm going to ask Maria Luisa to read out board member X voted for this person and keep a tally. And those ballots then become part of the official public record and will be recorded with the minutes. For members participating by the phone, I think they could email Maria Luisa and we could print those out if they prefer to do that, or they could just vote orally by phone, whichever they would like to do. If they do it by email, again, we'll be reading that out loud. So with that, Maria Luisa has very carefully done this, and the ballot for the board of directors is lavender. The first for the chair is lavender. So that's your first ballot. So at this time, I'm going to open up the floor for nominations for chair. I see the outgoing chair's hand and would call on him to make a nomination.
Yes, question, go ahead.
What are the rules regarding if someone, for example, if I wanted Mr. Ferre if I wanted to vote for Mr. Ferre?
Well, that's why I raised
I'm sorry,
my hand.
okay, that was my question.
That's why I raised my hand. So I am not a candidate for re-election, so that solves your problem. So here's, and I apologize for disrupting the rules that we have, because I want to ask permission for an exception, because I'm going to nominate Maritza, but I want to explain why I'm nominating Maritza.
The reason he's saying that is because generally you wouldn't have an explanation for
That's
a
correct,
nomination.
and that's why I'm asking for permission to do that. So here's my logic. Robert, Maritza, and I have served for 9 years. So those of us that are serving now, you said you're the rookie. You're not a rookie, my friend. You're not a rookie here. You're not a rookie in anything you do. But we've been around for 9 years. Now, Maritza was our chair for 2 years. That was 6 years ago and 5 years ago. You were there for 3 years. I think it's important that we have a sense of continuity. I think we've done pretty well, by keeping a sense of continuity. We had, in the past, we had chairs that served for more than 3 years. And in the beginning, when I began to serve, I wasn't too sure that I wanted to stay around, because I saw some stuff that I couldn't prove. I couldn't go to the state's attorney to do it, but I've been in that situation before in the city of Miami, but I had to act, So, but I wasn't happy, because I saw things that just displeased me. So when there was a change, a pretty substantial change in the board, we had a kind of an unwritten rule that nobody would stay for too long a time. And the longest since the new group came in was your 3 years. Javier is about to become the chairman of IBTTA. Maritza was very active in promoting that. I really think that it is poetic justice for Maritza to be the chair when Javier takes over the presidency, not this year but the following year. And I also think that we've had a pretty good experience, even though she and I have disagreed on some very substantial things. In some things she won, and others I won. But it's a collegial sense. And I really think that it's important that we have this continuity. So it is my pleasure to nominate Maritza Gutierrez as our chair.
Is there a second to that nomination? Mr. Avia seconds the nomination. Are there any other nominations for chair? Any other nominations for chair?
If not, then I would make a motion that this be a unanimous vote. And therefore, you don't have to have a record of who voted how.
Well, there will be a record because it would be unanimous, but it
Yeah,
should.
I move that this be a unanimous vote.
Any discussion?
Second.
Any discussion?
No objection.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, congratulations.
Do we have to read out now? Or do we
Moving on to the powder blue ballot, I will open the floor for nominations for vice chair. Who would like to be recognized to make a nomination?
I don't think, this is not the PRI, and this is not Mexico, and I don't think we should do this.
What about the spirit of continuity?
Well, I mean, that's a decision that the board has to make.
I would like to nominate Maurice Ferre.
Okay, is there a second to the nomination? The motion has been made to nominate Chairman Maurice Ferre to be vice chairman of the authority. Are there any other nominations? Are there
Yes,
any?
Robert Holland would like to nominate Rick Rodriguez.
Is there a second to that nomination? Okay, Mr. Rodriguez seconds the nomination. Okay, are there any further nominations for vice chair to the authority? Okay, at this point, at this point, I would like to open up the floor for questions of the candidates or comments regarding the candidates.
Okay. So I would like to make a comment, if at all possible. The reason that I second in the motion for Mayor Ferre and our past chair, I have never seen someone so passionate about developing and completing the strategic planning process, because typically the strategic plan, as he so ably described it, is looked upon as nothing more than a tool that you plop on a shelf. In this particular case, I think it's poetic justice to have the past chair in union with the upcoming chair, with the elected chair, complete the strategic planning process, and this is why I think it's so important that he occupy that chair through the completion of the strategic plan, and that is my comment.
For the record, I saw...
Robert Holland, if I may. Lord knows I love both Maritza and Maurice, and I know that they always give 100% to everything that they do. But I want to echo some of the comments that Maurice made as it relates to, us, he, Maritza, and myself having been on the board for 9 years. I strongly believe it's time that we start grooming new leadership on this board, because I can tell you I won't be on there for another term after this year, and some other colleagues might share some of those similar positions. So I think it's time that we start grooming other leadership to be involved in many of these issues with MDX as well. I still think that from a strategic standpoint, Maurice can still be intimately involved in that, and I commit to supporting him on getting it done. But I do think we need to start looking at some new leadership on the board and allowing others the opportunity to show their way.
Okay. Are there any further comments regarding the two candidates for vice chair? For the record, Maria Luisa, I saw that Maritza Gutierrez's hand was up to second the nomination of Rick Pena.
I don't feel that any member should be having to force and give themselves a second. I wanted to support Rick in this case.
Okay, so if you could reflect that in the minutes, please. Okay, any further comments about the candidates? Okay, at this time, I'd ask you to please take the powder blue ballot sheet, write down the name of which candidate you wish to vote for. Please print your name on it, signature, and a date, and pass it to Maria Luisa.
Something. Have you noticed the colors that have been given to us for these ballots? Yes, I noticed. But did you also notice for cherry was lavender? I like it. It's sweet.
Well, that's why I nominated you, because it was lavender. That was...
Really, once, if you could read out each individual vote, the name of the board member, and the person they voted for.
What about the
Do you
people
need
on the
help?
phone?
What? Oh, I need vote, I'm sorry, from the 3 people on the phone. Would you like to do it by email, or would you like to do it by voice vote?
It's going to be read either way. You might as well do it by voice. Robert Holland supports Rick.
Okay, Mr. Holland votes for Mr. Pena. Luz? I think we lost Member Weinberg. Okay, and Mr. Martinez?
Mr. Pena.
Okay, and so in addition to those 2 votes, if you could read out the other votes and who they voted for. I don't think your mic is on, or you know.
For Mr. Ferre, we have Mr. Vasquez, Mr. Pago, Mr. Fernandez-Guzman, Mr. Evia, Mr. Gonzalez, and Ms. Gutierrez, and Mr. Ferre.
Okay, for Mr. Pena?
For Mr. Pena, we have Mr. Holland, Mr. Rodriguez-Pena, Ms. Fano, Mr. Martinez. I'm only missing Ms. Weinberg's vote.
Okay, so
if
we
she's
should
on.
show her as absent. I think she may have had to leave. Okay, so could you announce the results then?
So Mr. Pena has 4 votes, and Mr. Ferre has 7.
Okay, so Mr. Ferre, congratulations. Okay, moving on to the appropriately green ballot sheet. If we could open up nominations for the office of treasurer, Ms. Gutierrez.
Yeah.
I'd like to nominate Carlos Guzman. He's done an excellent job, and I would really love to see him continue the work.
And I would like to echo that. Sorry.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Martinez.
Okay.
And I'd like to move that we nominate him as chair-elect in 2 years.
What?
I'm joking.
Okay, so Mr. Guzman has been nominated, and the nomination has been seconded by Mr. Avia. Do we have any further nominations for treasurer? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close nominations, and if you would prefer to just to elect Mr. Guzman by
Move that the vote be unanimous.
Okay, is all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so please record a unanimous vote. Okay, the next one is on white paper. Do we have a nomination for board secretary, which need not be a member of the board? Traditionally, it has been Maria Luisa.
Move that Maria Luisa be reelected secretary.
Second.
Second, third.
Are there any further nominations for board secretary? Can we then have a motion to elect Maria Luisa by acclamation?
Moved.
All in favor? Okay. The final office, which is also on white paper, is for the assistant secretary. And If I could open up nominations for that?
I'd like to nominate Eileen Figueroa.
Okay. Is there a second to that nomination? Okay, it's been seconded by Mr. Gonzalez. Any further nominations for the position of Assistant Secretary? Hearing none, I close the nominations. If we could have a motion. Okay, there's been a motion to elect
Second the motion.
by acclamation or unanimously. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Mr. Chairman, that concludes the elections.
Well, thank you very much. Mr. Director, you have anything else you want to add?
Just one announcement. First of all, congratulations to the entire board for a successful year, and as staff, we are committed to continuing to fulfill exactly what your policies are, which is making sure that our people here in Miami move safely and efficiently. So we're committed to that. On a business matter, you'll notice that at the end of the agenda for the next board meeting, we put August to be determined, TBD. Typically, our next board meeting is at the end of July. What's happening is that we've been seeing that more people take vacations in June and July because school is starting earlier. So in working with the chair, Madam Chair, we will look and see if we swap the July meeting to August and see, and we'll poll the members before we finalize that.
In other words, not have a meeting in July.
But have one at the end of
I think
August.
that's an excellent approach.
Is
Thank
there a
you, Mr.
motion
Chair.
that we adjourn? All right. Anybody have a good joke or predictions?
Not here.
Happy
Juan is not
birthday.
here.
You said it was your birthday yesterday.
It was. I'm trying to remember whether I'm 69 or 79.
And holding.
Okay, just for the record, the new offices will take effect as of July 1st, according to our bylaws. So you got a couple more days.
4 days, all right. Very good.
Yes.
Yeah, financial disclosure. Yeah. Oye, Javi, let me just tell you that te mandé un memorandum.
See, I read it. I read it.
Gracias.
I read it.
You did all right?
Yeah, I
Is there
read
anything
it.
you want to soften or?
No, I read it.